Awake, warriors awake, Juve morning come. Juve, Abaluba yeah, yeah, Abaluba yeah, yeah, Abaluba. King gang 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 is Juve. King gang 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 is Juve. Spirit rise come to touch the sun. Darkness pass and the morning come. We done pay homage to we ancestors. We done do the ritual for the libation. So we call in the warriors to stand on guard to protect and preserve this tradition. As we fill each heart, every hollow drum with love. Awake, warriors awake, Juve morning come. The rhythm go turn you round. The warriors coming down. Awake, warriors awake, Juve morning come. The rhythm go turn you round. The warriors coming down. King gang 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 is Juve. King gang 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 is Juve. Iron and steel set ablaze to the dawn. No reason to shelter or run from the storm. The drum call anointing every move we make. The rhythm commanding blood and mind to awake. You can't help but answer this clarion call. Not one man must stumble, not one must fall. Unmasking the spirit, come one, come all, with love. Awake, warriors awake, Juve morning come. The rhythm go turn you round. The warriors coming down. Awake, warriors awake, Juve morning come.
Hello and welcome to the Bub Report. In Grenada, the ruling New National Party marked its third anniversary in public office on March 13, 2021, after winning all 15 parliamentary seats for a third time in 2018. Since then, one of their former members, Tobias Clement, crossed the floor, giving Grenada an official opposition leader for the first time since 2013. The current Prime Minister and party leader, Dr. Keith Mitchell, indicated earlier in his term that this would be his last stint as political leader and Prime Minister, only to change his mind well into the party's term in office.
I would have preferred not to have. I think they are rational based on my own colleagues' views and general perception, and this might be the right time after the next election to hand over the reins to someone. So it looks likely, highly likely, that I will certainly run, unless of course I have some health issues or physical problems. And I'm sure you recognize that I don't look too badly. So maybe better than someone to see me go out and calling me old. I know I look better and able to do some things better than some of them who look much younger than I am. So.
Notwithstanding this declaration, some in the party are having conversations around succession planning. One of those people is Kennedy Budlow, a political operative of the New National Party.
We have to prepare for when he's no more of us. That's my concern. Because I don't feel the NNP coming out or the cocoon to understand that. It's hard for a leader to emerge when Dr. Mitchell possesses such strong personal character. It diminishing anybody's status.
In the current political climate in Grenada, some political activists have emerged to participate in the democratic process, including the recently formed Grenada Movement, led by Dr. Patrick Antwine. Kem Jones, a long-standing radio personality closely aligned to the National Democratic Congress, and a cadre of independent youth with no political affiliation, such as Ashida Charles, Joel Greenidge, and Michelle Alexander. Today on the Bub Report, we take a pulse of Grenada's political climate in the context of the ruling New National Party's third year in office. We also cross the international dateline to head to Australia, where we will be joined by a Grenadian PhD student who will share his experiences living in that country with some of the strictest COVID-19 lockdown protocols of any industrialized nation, but which also had immense success confronting the coronavirus. This is the week of March 21st, 2021, and we welcome our guests, political strategist William Joseph, international trade specialist Wendell Cornwall, political scientist Peter Wickham, and the deputy chairman of the National Democratic Congress, Kennedy Roberts. Thanks for joining us. Good morning, and let me take this opportunity to welcome you to another installment of the Bub Report. It is March 21st, 2021. It's also the first day or the second day of spring, again, my favorite time of the year, but it is also International Poetry Day. And a fun fact about the Eastern Caribbean in the context of International Poetry Day is that the region has the distinction of producing some of the world's most notable poet laureates. And as we celebrate International Poetry Day today, we here at the Bub Report would like to acknowledge poet laureates V.S. Naipaul of Trinidad and Tobago, Audre Lorde, who is not a poet laureate, but who is a Grenadian American and reputed and renowned for her incredible poetry, and the late Derek Walcott for their contributions to international poetry. Now, concerning today's program and today's lineup, for full disclosure, we did invite a representative of the New National Party to appear on our program, but they indicated that scheduling conflicts is making it difficult for a guest to join us from the party. This was not an effort to exclude a representative of the party, and so, as I said before, the Bub Report is a balanced platform where everyone is welcome. And so let me take this opportunity now to welcome Mr. Cornwall. Mr. Cornwall, good morning. It is actually 2 a.m. where you are, so let me thank you for taking the time to join us and for staying up. So Wendell, I wanted to bring you in here because you currently live in Australia. I know that Australia had some of the strictest lockdowns, but in looking at the U.S. Open, well, not the U.S. Open, but the Australian Open, I saw that there were throngs of people in the arena. And so it made me really curious about the success of Australia in managing COVID-19, but also how people experience that kind of lockdown. And as a Grenadian who lives and studies in Australia, could you tell us what that looked like and what was that experience like?
Sure. Well, first thing, let me just say thank you for having me on your program. And it's actually the 22nd here. You notice he said it was the 21st there.
Which is Monday, yes?
Monday the 22nd, yes.
Okay, it's Monday, okay.
Yeah. So with respect to the COVID restrictions that we had here, beginning in March, we entered very strict restrictions. They were actually called stage 3 restrictions. And again, I think in June. So we had two important breakouts in that period, in those periods of time. Now, the restrictions were very successful, in my opinion, and that's why you were able to see at the Australian Open so many persons actually out. Although there's still measures in place at that time, but people were able to go out and actually have some spectators at the Australian Open. Currently, the restrictions, the stage 3 restrictions have been removed. So it's almost business as usual, but there's still an air of caution. And what I mean by this is, so we can, and people can go out to work, they can go out as groups. The only requirement is that they always carry a mask with them. They wear masks in certain places, public transport, when you can maintain a distance of 1.5 meters and so on. But all that is to say that it has been very effective, the measures that were put in place. And while those measures were in place, actually, there was so much resistance to it. We see the resistance on the media in the United States. We had similar cases here. We had protests. But in large part, most Australians adhered to the restrictions. So we had to stay indoors. We couldn't go anywhere unless it was for emergency reasons, or it was essential services, or for shopping.
And I understand as well in my research that law enforcement, they held a big stick, if you will. They were extremely strict about if you actually violated those restrictions. Yes.
Oh yeah, yes, definitely. So very heavy fines were actually handed out for breaking those restrictions. You had road checks. I mean, some persons actually, tried to violate, tried to get away with breaking the rules. But like you say, I haven't had any personal experience with it, but what I've seen, the law enforcement, they were very effective. I wouldn't say heavy-handed, but they definitely were very, very strict and very effective in enforcing those regulations. There was actually one case where a lady, I think she went to a protest. I might be wrong, but the officers actually went to her house the next day and arrested her. I think she posted it on Facebook, or she was posting saying that she would go out when she shouldn't have, and they actually went to her house, arrested her. So that just goes to show how seriously the authorities took those enforcing those restrictions here.
Wow. So they went to, it harkens back to, well, it doesn't harken back. I think we live in sort of a dystopian age, an age of hyper surveillance, which, to be fair, we subject ourselves to that kind of surveillance because we use these platforms. And so we agree to sign up to these terms and conditions. But what state are you? What is it? Are you in Sydney, Perth? Where in Australia are you?
Oh, so yeah, I'm actually in Victoria. So Victoria definitely had, I think the Prime Minister here, the Premier, Dan Andrews, really took control of the situation early on, from my opinion. And you definitely saw a lot of resistance online to that. But he also garnered a lot of support for taking that stance, taking that position, and not backing down under the pressure to sort of ease up on the restrictions. So here in Victoria, we actually had just over 20,000 cases total, just under 900 deaths, I think. So very much, I mean, it's not the ideal to have any deaths. It's not the ideal to have a large number of cases, but in comparison to other countries, you can see that meeting the situation head on, confronting it head on, and taking it seriously from the outset really played a very important role in ensuring that a lot of our lives here were protected. You know, I would say this though. One thing that I was disappointed in as an international student um, was to see the position of the Australian government with respect to international students. So I don't know if you saw this or you read it, but the Prime Minister actually, in the initial stages of the outbreak, actually said that international students should find their way back home, really. Basically, he said, pack your bags, head back to your countries. We won't be able to offer any sort of support, which I found um, very very poor judgment, given the fact that international students contribute almost $40 billion to the economy here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's the main export, it's service export of Australia, and for me, the experience was tough, but it wasn't as tough as for some other international students. The experiences that I read, you had students that uh, lost their jobs, so they basically were homeless. I read stories of international students having to sleep on couches. I read stories of international students that were hungry. Um, so it was a very dire situation at the outset uh, when you see that Australia is recognized as a country with high quality education, and it does.
Mm-hmm.
And many international students come here in an effort. They make the sacrifice to be able to take advantage of that, and they contribute to the economy. But seeing that sort of position by the Australian government was really disheartening at that time.
Wendell, we do have some Grenadian students also in Australia, and I don't know the extent of other Caribbean island representation down there. But you just spoke about those challenges. Do you know anyone who from the Caribbean community who experienced those, and how have you guys been faring economically as a result?
Oh, so I know of two other Grenadians here. One is actually in Queensland, also doing a PhD. Another completed his master's and returned to Australia just recently. And in terms of their situation, in terms of the financial situation, I think um, we were okay. At least on my part, I was able to continue working at the university. So I tutor at the university. I do exam supervision. I actually also took up some casual work at the university. So I was able to at least sustain myself, right? So I wasn't in that sort of a dire situation economically. But I would say that psychologically, it has been pretty difficult, I think, not just for myself, but um, for my friend in Queensland, who's also from Grenada. Uh, really, because when you see everything that is, going on with the pandemic, and being cut off, not being able to actually travel home,
Mm-hmm.
um, not knowing when it's going to end, when things will return to some sort of normalcy, can really have a deep psychological impact. And I know mental health and so on is not something we really speak of much in the Caribbean. At least I think it's not treated in the appropriate manner. Um, but I think that would have been the biggest impact, that sort of isolation. This is not the first time that I've been through a pandemic. I was in Mexico studying during the 2009 swine flu
Right.
outbreak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it was easier then because it was hard, but it was easier because uh, there were so many other Caribbean students from Grenada, from St. Lucia, from Dominica, and other countries that you can share the experience with and sort of interact with. Here in Australia, we all spread up, we're spread out in different states, and like I tell you, I only know of 2 others. So that sort of isolation is not just a physical isolation, but it's also a mental isolation as well. Because you don't get to interact with people, and you don't really get to go out and socialize and do things that sort of take the stress off and so on. So I think that the biggest impact, at least for me, has been more psychological, that longing for being with family, just being able to go out and do things, being indoors from March till maybe October, without really going outside, you get stir crazy. It really sort of drives you up the wall,
And for context, geographical context, that is also Australian winter. Yes, right? Yeah. So I could only imagine what that must be like, because you're actually going into another fall right now. Yes?
Yeah, we are going into fall, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just came out of summer, and summer was actually pretty cool, surprisingly, for summer here in Australia.
Right.
So we're going into fall now, and then into winter once again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it like you said, it's with the cold weather, with the separation, without the socialization, it makes it a very difficult experience.
Mr. Cornwell, this was a very fascinating and important conversation. It is always good hearing from the Grenadian expat community in other parts of the world, and certainly I wish you all the best on your studies and your pending defense.
Yes. I wish you luck on yours as well. And thank you very much for having me on the program. I try to watch as often as I can. I've fallen asleep actually trying to stay awake watching the program because it's at 2 a.m., but I really do enjoy it. So it's really my pleasure. Thanks for having me on to share my experience. And I hope it helps others as well.
Absolutely, Mr. Cornwell. Thank you again, and all the very, very best to you. Okay, folks, we will be right back. We will take a quick segment break. In our first segment break, we have a clip from the current Prime Minister, who was, at the time in 1990, a member of the opposition in Parliament. He was not the leader of the opposition, but these were some comments he was making at the time in the context of the political environment in Grenada. That will tee us up to the second segment of the program, and we'll be right back.
Political field, the government has proceeded on a program of political victimization of its opponents, so that since the NDC came into office, its objective has been how to destroy its political opponent instead of how to build the country. And that has, of course, created a tremendous problem for the government, because in hurting one person or attempting to hurt one person, you create an atmosphere where several people indirectly get hurt by the process of attempting to hurt an individual. So that since the government came in, they have proceeded to fire scores and scores of professional people who they perceive supported the former government. And that, of course, has created an enormous sense of humiliation and a sense of lack of professionalism on the part of the government, as how people see the government operation. And there are many cases that have, case in point, that have created that problem. In the state corporations, many of the managers who worked under the New National Party's government were fired or had their characters assassinated for one reason or the other. And primarily, The only reason for it has been the association with the leadership of the New National Party as the government, present government, perceive it to be.
So that was back in 1991. At the time, Dr. Mitchell was a member of the opposition representing the St. George Northwest constituency, where he has since represented up to this day. And so let me take this opportunity to bring in the panel for this morning's discussion. Mr. Wickham, actually, I should say good afternoon to you because you are over in France. Are you in Paris, Mr. Wickham?
No, I'm actually in the south of France. I'm in the Catalan region on the French side. Just for the weekend, though.
So just for the weekend, so it's slightly warmer there where you are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Only ever so slightly.
Ever so slightly,
Yeah,
yes.
slightly,
Relatively
yeah.
speaking, yes. Okay. And
Yeah.
let me bring in Mr. Kennedy Roberts. Mr. Roberts, welcome to the Bub Report again. Your second appearance. Go ahead.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be with you again. You know, it's always warm to get the invitation, and as I indicated to your colleague, I'm willing, anytime the request is made, I'm available. It's a pleasure.
Okay. And Mr. William Joseph, welcome to the Bub Report.
Well,
I believe this is your first appearance.
it is, and I thank you. I thank you for your kind consideration. They tell me that congratulations are in order on
Yes.
your latest and very prestigious recognition.
Thank you so much.
All Grenadians. Wonderful.
It is much appreciated. Also, that thanks must be attributed to the village that grew me up. That village, that community of educators and family members in Grenada who are responsible for my success today. So I thank you so much, Mr. Joseph. Okay, so gentlemen, welcome. So what we're doing today is that we'll be having a conversation around the midterm, a midterm conversation with respect to the NNP administration. Now, Mr. Joseph, I would begin with you. How would you grade the NNP's term in office, mid-year period in office thus far?
All right. Well, thank you. Let me say right away that I'm going to be concerned in trying to make some responses as distinct from giving answers.
Yeah.
So, so on this question of the performance, I think for me, we ought to start with a standard. What is the standard against which we are going to evaluate performance? Now, for us, the Constitution of Grenada, which establishes the parliament and also a cabinet, does not in fact specify what that standard is. But we find a phrase in there in the Constitution that's called good government. It relates to the work of the parliament in passing laws. And because of the fact that it is the very people in the parliament who are in the executive, in the cabinet, one would take it that the policies and programs and activities and conduct of the government ought also to fulfill that standard of good government. So what is good government? It's not defined, so I will attempt to suggest what I think it might be. All right. I think broadly it ought to address the question of those things that are of benefit to the citizens of Grenada. All of those things. What are we doing about national development? Or what are we doing about the preservation of our heritage and cultural assets? These things are important. And importantly, the question of the treatment of citizens. I think that those are issues against which we should seek to evaluate the performance. Perhaps we can add to that the question of social and political instability. So we see where we go from there. So the grade, perhaps I would chime in a little later when I hear other colleagues, but I do have a grade in mind.
You do have a grade in mind, but let me bring Mr. Roberts. I will flip that question on its head, Mr. Roberts, and I would say, how would you grade your party with respect to its ability to be a viable alternative to Grenada and to the Grenadian people in the next elections? Your party has always been has the impression that you guys are not necessarily ready for prime time, if you will. And so, what grade would you give the NDC during this midterm period?
All right, and thanks again, and greetings to all the viewers, listeners, and so on. I will answer by acknowledging again what are the standards I take from my colleague, Brother Willie. And based on the performance of the NDC in the 2013 elections and the 2018 elections, I think we have to acknowledge and face the reality of what had happened. So since the 2018 election, we have seen that Brother Nazim Burke has stepped down as a political leader. We had Brother Andal as the interim political leader for some time. And in the convention in November 2019, we elected Sister Franca Bernadine as the new political leader. And we all know that due to certain personal reasons, including her health, she has decided to step down from the active politics in the forefront. We now have Brother Adrian Persuada filling the position of our leader, and we expect that the next convention, and he would either be appointed officially or we would have a new leader. So the reality is the NDC is going through an organizational phase, and from within the organization, I see the work that we have done. We have done a lot of analysis. Well, we could do a bit more. We have done a lot of planning. We've come up with a strategic plan. We believe that the Grenada needs to have a clearly defined focus, and it is important to set a vision and a clear plan as to where we want to go. We've participated in the development of the national plan, and this is something I'm going to mention a little later on in terms of our involvement in civil society and trying to contribute to Grenada's development while being the opposition party. We also have to acknowledge that the public's perception is still that we need to get our act in order, and we are working tremendously hard from several angles to try and ensure that as the other viable vehicle for governance in this country, with the fact that Grenadians are seeking alternatives, our approach is try and build a united force. Together we are stronger. Together we're going to be able to share that vision and appreciate that vision a lot clearer. And the rate at which this country is going now, it is difficult for us to stand idly by and not pursue. So I would say that internally, I would give us a strong B for our planning and organizing. The only reason I would not give us an A is because the leadership is not clearly defined. While we have several persons at the constituency level being considered as caretakers, we have not put that out to the public as yet. So I am a bit conservative, and I know that the public might have a different opinion, but I'm confident that the framework has been set and Grenada is poised to see the NDC do a lot more in the coming weeks and months to show the viability of the possibility of governing this country in a manner consistent with human development, fairness, equity, and the interests of Grenadians at home and abroad.
Okay, let me bring in Mr. Wickham now. Now, Mr. Wickham, the reason I brought you here is because you have, in many respects, accurately predicted election outcomes in Grenada for a while. Yes, and you also predicted the last clean sweep, and so we've been seeing that pattern though in some Caribbean islands where parties are returning to office on landslide victories. Is it that they are well resourced and they have the resources of the state behind them to be able to pull off these landslide victories? Or is it that the alternative parties, the opposition parties, are not sufficiently organized to mount a significant challenge?
Yeah, I mean, it's an excellent question. I would say it's a bit of both. I'm happy that the person that spoke before me kind of laid a good groundwork for this kind of analysis, because in the final analysis, it does have a lot to do with the opposition.
Yeah.
I've studied clean sweeps in Grenada. Barbados just had one. Years ago, we had one in St. Lucia. St. Kitts and Nevis, they also had one. So there's a reasonably good pattern of clean sweeps across the Caribbean where we can look at factors you could say, factors contributing to the landslide, the anatomy of a landslide. And in many instances, yes, you have on the one hand a strong party that is consolidated and relatively stable. But on the other hand, you usually have an opposition that is performing horribly. And I think in the case of Grenada, that has been the recurring factor. I've made comments in the past about the origins of that because I do believe that Grenada's natural development was interrupted by the revolution and then, of course, the invasion that took place right after. Subsequent to that, the opposition force, essentially, Grenada has one party, which is the National Party. And it seems as though every other political party has been like an offshoot or a development of that and haven't been able to really get themselves together. And I could say that certainly Dr. Mitchell's NNP appears to be the one that has been able to hold itself together most. And all of the breakaway factions and different groups and whatnot have never really been able to organize themselves well enough. They got into office in 2008. And I think that was a good opportunity for them to demonstrate that they were organized. And within 2 years, the situation fell apart. At that time, I expressed the view that I thought that the NDC could have recaptured the situation by identifying that they had a weakness in terms of the leadership and by identifying alternative leadership that was powerful, that was popular. The NDC wanted none of that, and they went towards the election under the same leader, and the rest is history. So I would say that, generally speaking, the missing link in terms of Grenada that has been causing this a lot is an opposition's inability to get its act together and to have popular leadership and leadership which people can rally around, and also internal cohesion. And I trust that the analysis that my good friend will be doing will reveal the fact that there's some of those issues that have to be addressed in terms of the popularity of the leadership and also the style and the way in which they approach their politics. NDC has been attacking Dr. Mitchell on the same basis for the last 20 years. This question of Dr. Mitchell's apparent corruptness, which is evidenced by this briefcase thing, which I've been hearing about for most of my adult political life.
But it goes before that. It goes to the era of Stone. Remember when all of that?
Well,
I digress.
if you want to, but if you want to take it there, that's fine. But the point that I keep making, when we have these discussions, is that as scandalous as all of this sounds, right? The reality is that the electorate has not really bought into it, because you've brought the same thing 4 times, and you've been beaten badly 4 times. And I think that the opposition, the electorate in Grenada is more interested in something else, and clearly it's not the extent to which the NNP's leadership is corrupt, because I think that issue has been addressed. And I would say across the region, I've argued that in Antigua and Barbuda, I've argued that in Barbados. I think in Trinidad and Tobago in 1986 was probably the only election that was successfully won on corruption. But in the vast majority of other instances, you bring moral turpitude, you bring corruption, you bring scandal. It sounds good on a political platform, for sure. But when it comes down to a question of voting, people want to vote on something solid. And, say what you like, Dr. Mitchell has delivered in terms of the economics, in terms of getting Grenada out of a recovery. I mean, you had a tragic hurricane several years ago that flattened the economy. And while I will be the first to admit that Grenada's economic indicators are not great, they're not what they should be, I would say that Grenada's development still lags substantially behind where it should have been. The fact of the matter is that you're not doing that badly, and you're doing better than some of your OECS neighbors. And I don't think this is lost on people. So if I were to give an assessment, I would say that we have to look pre-COVID, we have to look post-COVID. We have to ask, what are the voters of Grenada looking for? And I think it was economic development primarily. As far as how that was delivered, I don't think that a bad job has been done. However, I do feel that people wanted more out of the electorate. I think that post-COVID, however, people are all about the ability to get things back to at least how they were. And I think the expectations have fallen substantially. At the same time, we have NDC, that seems to have fallen apart during the COVID period. And I think that that's pretty tragic, because here was an opportunity for you to start to build something, because the next election will be here in fairly short order. I know Dr. Mitchell is saying that he's running again, which to me would have been an opportunity had he not run for the NNDC to say, well, let me see if I can capture some of this space when the new leadership comes in. The fact that that's not happening now is essentially another handicap.
What makes you come to that conclusion that you felt as if the party didn't get their act together? And I'll bring in Mr. Roberts, who can perhaps articulate another position. But I would ask you to expand on the notion that you felt that the NDC has not gotten its act together during this period, Mr. Wickham. Mr. Wickham, did you hear the question? I don't think
you want me to go again, or?
Yes, go
ahead.
Yeah,
I heard the question.
Yeah,
I heard the question. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So I'm asking you to expand on that notion.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's the situation with the leadership. The fact that your leader, the leader of the NDC, left during that period, and there was no capacity to replace her immediately with another leader. The fact that questions of candidacy and so on have not really been settled, and I don't believe that it's been reflected in terms of the way that the party has presented its image in the Senate and so on. I think that the opposition, the the referendum would have been an excellent opportunity for the NDC to demonstrate a level of cooperation with the government and essentially capture some space. I think that thing was completely scuttled, because I think the issues at stake in terms of your referendum were issues that the opposition certainly could have benefited from, and I thought that it was unfortunate that did not happen. So those are some of the issues which were of concern to me, and I feel that these represent opportunities that have been lost, and you're now in a situation where you're looking at an election, soon, well, in a couple of years, and the question is, who leads the party, who are the candidates, is the party structure in place, is the party in a position to raise funds for the next election, what are the policy positions that the party is articulating? All of these issues, I feel are I'm anxious to hear Mr. Roberts respond.
Yes. Mr. Roberts, I'll give you a chance to respond. Mr. Wickham said a mouthful here. Go ahead.
Well, you see, Brother Kellon, we have to acknowledge certain facts. We cannot put our head in the sand and say, well, things are nice and rosy and NDC is fully ready and organized, when we do not have a consensus on whether Brother Persuader is going to continue to be our leader and function in that capacity, or whether somebody will emerge. So these are other facts. We have to also acknowledge that NDC was in office from 2008 to 2013. And a lot of people are of the opinion that they lost the opportunity to prove to the Grenadian people that they should be given another opportunity because of their internal issues. We have to acknowledge that since the last election, there are a few of us who have stepped forward, because I was very involved with the NNP. I ran for the NNP in 2008. So I know the inside of the belly of the beast, as you would say. And we have to acknowledge that NDC is not going through the best of times. However, we must also acknowledge that we have a good 40% of the electorate. We have a significant percentage of the population who are dissatisfied with what is going on currently. The people have lost trust in this government. They have lost trust from the time the last election was concluded. All the lies you heard about oil and gas, about implementing national health insurance, about giving the workers their pension and so on. The people have lost trust with this government. And as a result, we've seen them degradation of the environment. We've seen a lot of issues that concern the people generally. And somebody is going to emerge. But we have to acknowledge that the NDC has a culture also that they want to ensure that they take their time and do certain things. And, I cannot say with 100% certainty what tomorrow brings, because we have to believe that God decides on leadership to a big extent, and he provides the opportunity to let a country choose the leader that they deserve. And I believe that within the next few months, somebody is going to emerge, somebody is going to step forward and make that contribution. And it is really based on their work among the people, so that they will be recognized as having the capacity, the ability, and we have to be able to package that leader in such a way to create that unity among the party. Because, you know, there are realities that we have to address, and the population, some people are, especially within the NDC, they have their concerns about certain individuals. They want to promote certain persons. But I believe that Grenadians want change. Grenadians are as Brother Wickham has said, they know who Dr. Mitchell is. All this thing about corrupt, we know the person that he is, and I don't think these sort of arguments are going to work. But in a little while, I would share some specific issues that the NDC is going to make as top priority if given the opportunity to govern, because we must talk about specifics, and we must talk it in a manner where people can believe that you're working in the interest of the people rather than just trying to maintain power at all costs, which is what NNP has been doing. But I believe the NDC has the plans, and somebody is going to step forward, somebody is going to emerge, and it has to happen sooner rather than later.
It has to happen. Operative word here. I'm going to bring in a comment, which is one of the questions that I had from Cheyenne Date, who says, Mr. Roberts, there needs to be a culture change. The dynamics of our political landscape have changed. NDC needs to change with that too. And I'm going to bring in Mr. Joseph here. I see Mr. Joseph nodding. Now, one of the things that I've observed, in this period in Grenada is that there is a significant amount of youth resistance by young people who identify themselves as more independent leaning, but they're not leaning towards the National Democratic Congress. So what does it say that these young people, that you have so much significant energy by the Ashida Charles of this world, the Joel Greenidges of this world, who are disillusioned to the point where they will not affiliate with your party? Neither would they affiliate with the NNP. Mr. Joseph, I'm going to ask you to chime in there.
Yeah, happy to chime in. Now, a couple of points. I think one of the problems is that in the last several years, my reading of the NDC is that they have been more institutional than being political. They've spent a lot of time on the internals, this and that and the other, and then they top that up with the policy framework document. So all internal stuff, nobody's buying that stuff. So that's my first reaction. The second thing is this, regarding the clean sweep and so on and what it says about the NDC. I think we need to remember two things. When the NNP was defeated by the Congress in 2003 and 2008, and I say so with true facts, 2003 and 2008, not installed in office in 2003, but won the elections essentially, and in 2008 decisively and formed the government. We must remember that the defeat of the NNP then had nothing to do with the state of the economy. It had everything to do almost with the conduct of the political leader of the NNP, how he was treating people, the fact that he had elevated and crowned himself, and the fact that he had engaged in all sorts of stuff. And just a footnote, this corruption issue is a brand issue now. So, you say NNP and you say Keith Mitchell, that is part of the brand. So we did not discuss that. But so my point is that in 2008, that defeat in 2013 had a lot to do with the internal division of the NDC. We know the facts behind that, and Wickham knows those facts also. Let me say that on its face, it also induced weakness in the ability of the NDC to manage the economy. So that factor is crucial, that division factor. And it laid the basis for the first clean sweep. Then we came to the next period. And what we found is that the NDC has since then experienced a significant degrading. Now, if you lost 2 elections in the way in which you lost it, in terms of the magnitude, you land in what I would describe as a wilderness period. And if we go biblical, we would remember that wilderness experience is essentially about 3 things. It is about transition. It is about training, and it is about transformation. So how long is it going to take us the NDC, to get out of that wilderness period and answer the question about leader in a decisive way. We are still clutching around. There is still no certainty. A very little evidence of that, of where their mind is at when it comes to the question of a leader. Now, this is Grenada. You do not talk about, you can't achieve political success in the Grenadian political culture unless you have a leader who matters with the people, a leader with standing, not necessarily charismatic, not necessarily, but he must enjoy respect of the people.
But Mr. Joseph, what would you say? I mean, what would you say would account for the fact that the NDC has not been able to attract that kind of leader? I mean, Franca Bernardine recently resigned, citing health reasons, and now you have an acting political leader, I believe. Mr. Roberts can correct me if I'm wrong, if that is his proper title. Yes, but our folks also seem not to like that bill of goods that's been sold.
Well, and rightly so. I dismiss it myself entirely. You see, the party needs to put its hands around the centrality of the leader in the politics. The NDC could come with all kinds of programs and policies. Kenya just promised us a list coming up. I don't buy that stuff. Even he hasn't mentioned it yet, but I can tell him right away I don't buy that stuff. The thing begins, success in the politics begins with a leader who matters with the people. There must be standing, and I'm not necessarily saying it must be charismatic, but that leader must enjoy a significant standing. He must have a certain stature. He must be a credible leader, because the issue is, what is your offer in relation to what? In relation to your promise to govern of running the government successfully. It's not any and anybody. It's not an internal succession story. Well, I was acting when the one was there, so it's me now, my turn. That is nonsense. And to the extent that they continue fronting with that kind of thing, 15-0 again. 15-0 again. You know, it is wrong-footed, and it doesn't come from the head. It comes from some other place. And I think, I mean, I've been very kind of crude and so on now, but I think until and unless the NDC settles itself, gets out of that institutional mode, because they've been locked into that from the Buck era and continuing, and understand the political reality of the situation, they are not going to do well.
Mr. Wickham, Mr. Joseph seems to be saying a lot of the things that you intimated, and Mr. Roberts, you are getting some free advice here from these two gentlemen. But Mr. Joseph, someone just said, William, stop it. You were once opposed. You were once NDC opposed to NNP. Again, I don't know what the context is there.
Unfortunately, the view is expressed, but I respect it. I remain an NDC voter. I am an NDC voter, but I have a problem. I had a problem with Victor, and he knows why. And I have a problem in the sense that the current cohort is not pulling itself together. And for a long while, they appeared to be interested in getting help. For a long while. So that when they made a call a couple of months ago for people to come in and so on, some of us began to question the sincerity of that invitation. Listen, this is serious times.
I will give Mr. Roberts a response, but Mr. Wickham, I want you to chime in briefly on some of the things that Mr. Joseph just said.
No, Mr. Joseph is on the ball. You know, and I like the biblical reference. I'm not a believer myself, but I find the biblical reference is powerful, because the question is, who's going to lead the Jews into Jerusalem? And I think that is really the question that the NDC supporter is asking. Who is the leader that's going to light a fire, that's going to say, come follow me, and I will take you to the promised land? And I think that's one of the big issues that has been missing. Look, I did a survey for the NDC in 2015, I believe. It was either 2015 or 2016, that identified the problem, and it was basically the same problem that it was today. People understood that Tillman Thomas was leading the party simply because Tillman Thomas was the only person that everyone could not disagree on, and basically he was there for that reason. Nice guy, you know, honest fella, decent guy. But ultimately, he didn't sparkle. And I think that what Grenadians wanted was sparkle. I think that they tolerated him to the extent that they were tired. And I think that that was what I feel delivered power to them in 2008. I met a lady who was a security guard in the airport. And I remember she was telling me as I was leaving just before the 2008 election, she said, boy, we tired of Mitchell now. We had enough of him. And I looked for her subsequently to that, and I'll tell you what she said shortly. But I felt that that to me said it, and I was seeing it certainly in my own polling, that people were just tired of having one government for 3 terms. So the opportunity was created. As much as that opportunity was scuttled, it basically meant now that you're going to have a long time before you're going to be able to rebuild confidence. What she basically said to me before the 2013 election, and I looked for her, was that she said, I was tired, but goodness gracious, I never thought it would be this way. And it looks as though we're going to have to go back. So that really is it. The concern I have, though, when I listen to Mr. Joseph is who exactly is the NDC going to put to lead that has that sparkle? And I agree that the person has a sparkle. The question is, in a country the size of Grenada with limited resources, limited human resources, and a distinct disinterest in politics, because there are people that I can think of now that I have spoken to and said, why haven't you stepped forward for leadership in Grenadian politics? And I can think of a very attractive, politically attractive woman that I spoke to about it. And she said, I can make a far more decent living in the private sector, offering my trade. And I think that sadly is the reality where the political environment is not particularly attractive for a lot of competent professionals, and Grenada has quite a few of them all across the diaspora. So you say to me to put down my job in the CDB or my job in the United Nations or my job at the university in Australia and travel back to Grenada to fight up, to become a member of parliament, to work for the amount of money that an MP is paid in the hope that I can someday be elected leader. It's a tall order. It's a very tall order. And I think that as much as I agree that this is a challenge, I'm still curious to know how exactly is the NDC going to find and put their hands on that person that will be able to lead the supporters of the NDC into the promised land. It's a very tall order. Nazim Burke was not that person to do it. Franca Bernardine was not the person to do it. So the question is, who else comes up now as an alternative that you can say, well, maybe that person can be the alternative? Personally, I felt that Peter David was that person. And I've said that several occasions, but at the time, that was not acceptable. So you've lost that opportunity. So who else are you going to find to put your hands on? And I'm anxious to hear from the NDC's team leader who that person is that they may think can be the Messiah that will lead us to the promised land. Well, lead the NDC.
So let us get back to the context of the discussion. The discussion was analyzing the NNP's midterm performance in office, and that's what we want to get to. So in the next, I will take another break, and we will segue into that discussion because again, we need to have that conversation. So in the second segment, I was able to do some research and find some footage from the 1990 elections in Grenada. That was when the NDC won. That was the last time, well, before they won in the 2000s, but that was the last time that they formed the government. They didn't win the election outright, but they won enough seats to form the government. So I'm going to tee up that footage from the Associated Press, and we will be right back.
It was a total team effort, and our candidates worked extremely hard so that we could achieve a victory.
That clip ended with the late Prime Minister of Grenada, Sir Nicholas Brathwaite, who served as Prime Minister from 1990 to 1995. So back to the discussion. I believe I will give you a chance, Mr. Roberts, to respond to the claims, but we really want to get to the meat of the discussion, and that is a postmortem of the current administration in office. I believe a lot of the issues around the NDC has been already exhausted, but I will give you a chance to respond. And Mr. Joseph, I will start with you. Dr. Mitchell does not have any plans of going anywhere anytime soon. Yes. And so he indicated that he will be contesting the next elections. So going into the next elections, what is he going in with? What record does he have?
Yes. Well, yeah, very interesting. I think to a large extent, if you take a sort of balance sheet approach to it, one is likely to find a number of things that the government under Keith Mitchell in the current period, and if we take the 2013 into now as one continuous period, there are a number of areas in which they have done quite well. I think evidently they've been able to pay their bills, whether it is paying the public officers or whether it is paying the debt, paying down the debt. They've been able to do that. We did enjoy some significant collaboration between the government and the social partners. That was good. It sent a very good message about national unity and so on. There was some evidence of foreign direct investment coming through the CBI conduit. There was some so that it, there was some activity, especially for tradesmen, working class people, to find jobs in construction and so on. So I think those would be on the positive side. On the other hand, I think that we've had cases where the Dr. Mitchell has not lived up to that thing you quoted him, you played him saying in 1990, thereabout, the first clip. He has committed every sin that he identified back then, primarily his treatment of citizens. So he has abused power, in my view, in the way in which he has treated a number of citizens. So, we could leave aside the corruption thing and just look at conduct. Look at conduct, look at treatment of citizens, and I think the thing begins to fall there. There is now some creeping evidence of some instability because of the issue with the public sector unions. That I think there hasn't been sufficient constructive leadership regarding that, meaning bringing that to closure. And I think that
constructive leadership on whose part?
Well, on the part of the administration.
On the part of the administration, okay.
Yeah.
But they are intransigent. They're not moving on that,
Right. Well, they're taking their risk and so on, and one would see whether it costs them at the polls the next time. Of course, it's not a single issue, but it may be a contributing factor. One is not sure. So I would say that the regime, for its experience, and the experience of the Prime Minister in particular over these years. Now, this is unlike, listen, historical facts. Keith Mitchell has been Prime Minister for over 20 years. Eric Gary, the founder of the nation, hardly lasted 5 years. So we have a leader in whom the people have vested almost total confidence. And why? I will say this and then I will shut up. The support that the NNP enjoys is rooted in something many, many years ago. When we had the estate system in vogue, the estate workers were in a relationship with someone called the owner, the estate owner. When that system collapsed, the estate system, it was replaced by something called government. And guess what? You know who replaced the estate owner? In the minds of ordinary Grenadians, the Prime Minister. So people, the Grenadian people, almost to a man, and this is going to the psychographic analysis of the thing. They want to be in a relationship, whether it is real or whether it is symbolic, with a leader. And that is the foundation of the success of the NNP. Yeah, you know, they've had money and so on. They've been gifted a thing when NDC self-destructed, all of those things. But taking at its core, and that is why Keith could sit back and say, watch, I ain't going again, I'm coming back. Because he knows, he understands what is behind the numbers. And he also understands that there ain't nobody there who could take that over in the immediate period. I wouldn't say foreseeable, but I would say in the immediate period. So that is where the thing is at. And let me just say this finally, that I think that notwithstanding, you know, we give the NNP a grade of perhaps a B thereabout, and that would be very generous, but I think it would be fair. But I think we ought now to be looking forward. And for me, as a Grenadian, COVID-19, these things that COVID has induced for us, affecting our lives, coincides with our 50th anniversary as an independent country. So we have these two forces. We have that, and therefore, what is it saying to us? It seems to me that it's a great opportunity for someone to come forward with a vision for Grenada for the next 50 years. And the back of that, support that with new age politics. We need to put an end to all this knifing stuff and, you know, everybody running down everybody else. All of those things that sort of prevent or deter good quality Grenadians from entering in the political arena. And you know, this question of leadership for the nation is so crucial. And the need for us to prepare our young people, those of us who are 60 and over, we have blown it. And I think, though, that some of us have the opportunity to help to train the younger ones in their 30s and 40s so that they can take this mantle. So the leadership question going forward has to come from there. It has to come from there, that cohort of a younger generation of Grenadians, but they must be properly trained. So I've said a lot, perhaps too much.
Yeah, Mr. Roberts, I'm going to bring you in. How would you grade the NNP in their midterm period?
Now, again, I am an economist, and I like to look at my data to give me an indication as to what to say. But I'm also a social sector economist, where social development, human development is at the core of who I am. When you look at the data, as I mentioned in the introductory remarks, the NNP has been able to show the numbers looking good. The economy up to 2019 had been growing for 6 years consecutively. We've reduced the debt to GDP ratio substantially. We have seen certain investments taking place, but we also recognize that the level of investment is focused on foreign direct investment. When you look at the two major projects being discussed now in Mount Hartman and Livera, we have to ask, is that consistent with the sort of Grenada we want to see in 50 years? I am a child of the revolution. I happen to have had a very close relationship with Maurice Bishop, with Bernard Cord, and the others. As you know, I was a diplomat in Cuba at the age of 19. I've had the opportunity to be a permanent secretary, the director of budget and planning in the Ministry of Finance, worked at the OECS Secretariat, and for the last 23 years, 22 plus years, I've been down at St. George's University. We have to look at what Grenada has given to a lot of us and see how we could contribute back. I understand the political ramifications of not having a clearly defined leader within the NDC. But I realize that the NNP had been focusing on making the books look good while the people are suffering. We are at a situation in Grenada now, and it has been heightened with COVID, where the level of unemployment is crazy. You have young people losing hope. All we're seeing is traffic wardens and menial tasks. We're not seeing the contributions to NIS increasing because our level of income is very low. We need to look at ways in which we can increase household income. We have to look at ways in which we can strengthen that social wage of health and education, which can be done and which this government has failed in addressing. The need for connectivity now is of tremendous importance. People who are living in poverty, people who cannot afford electricity, much less internet, their children are not being able to benefit from this online training, learning that we're talking about. Our school system has failed Grenadians in the last 25 years, where people are coming out of the school system without knowing what they like to do. We must go back to some of the principles of the revolution, where education and health was ingrained, where community involvement was constant. We have a situation now where our public service is in total disarray. We have more contract workers in the civil service, and 99% of them are NNP affiliates. We have a situation where the ministries of health, education, all of them is split up into components where the leadership is not strong. We have situations where ministries are not even having departmental meetings. People are not communicating among themselves in terms of a plan and a direction. We have a situation where our environment is degraded, and this government is giving benefit to investors at the expense of Grenadians. When we lose the land in Mount Hartman to these investors and the sort of mega project they're talking about, Grenadians will never ever be able to own these lands anymore. The only consolation I have is that historically NNP has a reputation of failed projects. And I believe that what they're doing in Mount Hartman is not in the best interest of Grenada. What they're doing in Rivera.
But Mr. Roberts, you're saying that you were a member of the NNP when
Yes.
a lot of these projects, especially the first Mount Hartman project, was conceptualized. You defended those projects on the NNP campaign. So let us also put your record into context, Mr.
Okay,
Roberts.
so I challenge you to go back. When I ran in 2008, I was on the platform, and I did support the NNP in 2013 elections because of the chaos in the NDC. But I also recognize that this NNP team was bullshitting people to the extent that they have you talking, they have you involved, but they were not implementing positive recommendations. You know, healthcare is my thing for decades.
You are a public health expert, yes.
You know, I'm a health economist. I pursued national health insurance, and I told the Grenadian people that the NNP is telling them lies. They're not telling them based on evidence. And as you've seen, they're going to blame national health insurance on COVID now. But unless you improve the quality of care at your district level, you cannot ask people to contribute significantly more than they're already contributing to our health sector. So, Brother Willie, when you say you're not even going to listen to what I'm saying in terms of that vision because you think it's a waste of time, I believe it is important, and you reiterate it in your last statement. Grenadian needs to have a vision of where we want to go. We want to be a happier people. Under COVID, people's mental health has been compromised to the extent people walking about smiling and they're grieving inside. Children are not able to get the nutrition, and this government is not promoting agriculture. They're promoting tourism still. As of now, the priority of this government is still promoting tourism. They're still working towards opening the borders as a main industry without giving complementary support to agriculture and fisheries. So as a result, we need to share the vision, but I agree and I understand that it cannot just be focusing internally and organizing and planning, but we have to go out there and meet the people, listen to the people, and hopefully the people will give us some indication that who should float.
Mr. Joseph?
Please, Kennedy, you know, I don't often draw swords on you and so on, and I won't do so now. But let me just say this, that when I reacted to what you said initially, I understood you to be promising us a list of policies. You didn't. I am pretty sure I didn't hear you say you're going to suggest a vision. So if I was wrong about that, I apologize. But I really do think that it was a set of policies. And one of the reasons why...
Because I really said that when you look back at it, you would see I talked about some specific things that the NDC hope to do.
That's the point.
Yes.
Now, one of the reasons why I challenged that, you even in that preliminary way, has to do with the fact that we now have locked in place, and you know this happily, a national sustainable development plan for the country. So really and truly, political parties, a lot of the work has been done. I have described the national development plan as positive, not perfect. It's done by Grenada.
But you know, I was the NDC's representative on that committee. And you were also, you were also a member, and we sat side by side on many occasions. And you're aware that a lot of the things that are happening now with these mega hotel projects are not part of the plan. You know.
Please, my brother, please. Unfortunately, while you labored in the vineyard with us there, your party has up to this date not endorsed the National Sustainable Development Plan. This is a major insult of national proportions. So let's put it aside and let's talk about this thing between contest, if you will, agriculture, and where do we locate the development nexus? Where do we do that? I think that this discussion about agriculture and tourism is sterile. Listen to me. Grenada's, the proudest aspect of our national life in Grenada now is that Morris Bishop International Airport. You know what sustains it? You know what justifies it? Morris Bishop. Morris Bishop, in a speech before the thing and all that nonsense back in 83, when he promised us that airport, he said, this is what's going to take Grenada forward. Right then, we have the airport. Now, it was not agriculture. Agriculture has its place. In fact, tourism will do much more for agriculture than agriculture can do for itself by itself. So I think we don't need to contest it, this or that. We need both. But if you think in terms of our natural resources and so on, and the need for investment to move that, to transform it from raw resources into capital value, we are going to have investments, and much of that investment is going to come in the tourism sector, much of it. I don't see anybody coming here to invest in a banana plantation. One last point, brother host. You know, this thing about farm roads and borrowing money from the Kuwait. We could borrow some money. Don't say farm roads anymore because we've been building farm roads for 40 years. Let's borrow 40 million and let's do the following with it. Medium-sized agro-processing plants. We train 20 Grenadian youngsters in food technology and so on. We put a fund in place to support farmers to grow the fruits and vegetables behind that thing, and so on and so on and so on. You happy with that?
All right, because you're saying we're talking the same language, but my point is the government is not showing any inclination of going in that direction. Fisheries has tremendous potential. We're not touching the tip of the... Pity Martinique and Carriacou have been mecca for fisheries and boat building. No support, encouragement. So what I'm saying is the NDC is at this stage now where I think we're poised to go to the next level. I think the Grenadian people are looking, they're hunting, and as they say, cock must float. So while we acknowledge the current reality, we cannot, as I said, be naive and think that all is rosy. And I cannot say with certainty when, but I know that the Grenadian people are ready to get rid of Dr. Mitchell and the NNP. I know that there's a mood on the ground, even among the same youth, Kem Jones and Joel and Ashida and so on. While they're not affiliated with the NDC in an official manner, they're for Grenada. And we need to see people rise up for Grenada. As you rightly said, Willie, we don't need an NDC leader. We need a national leader. Somebody that can bridge the gap between the old and the young, between all the different parties, between the period of the revolution, of Gary, of, we have to heal. This country has suffered tremendously in the last half a century for various reasons. And Grenada needs somebody to help heal that process, to really give young people the sort of hope that has been missing for too long. So we have to get back to our spiritual roots. We have to ask God for the guidance and protection, because really and truly, I am convinced that we cannot do it alone anymore. We have to look at our ancestors and guidance from above to achieve our goals. So when I speak and I think of what is happening in Grenada, right now, Grenada is not talking foreign policy of building our relationships with Africa. We have Mia Motley in Barbados and others in the region talking about our link with the continent, with the motherland. During the revolution, Grenada supported the African National Congress, and it is public knowledge that Thabo Mbeki and others had Grenadian passports to travel around the world because of the revolution. Because of our link to Africa, Kenneth Kaunda came here, Samora Machel. We had relationships that people look at Grenada now and we're embarrassed. We need to step up, and I think we can.
Mr. Roberts, let me take some of the comments. We have a lot of comments coming in, but I just want to share a comment here from one of the viewers. She said, the numbers on the SEED program have risen. People who were children on the program years ago are now adults and are still on the program. In other words, they graduate from one stage to the next in the program. What analysis can be made on the government's efforts in improving the standard of living for people? That's just one interesting comment that came in there that I really wanted to look at. And then Akeem Julian says a whole deconstruction and reconstruction is needed. Let's see. Then we have another commenter saying it is time to change the table setting. In my view, we should be far more advanced than where we are now instead of playing catch up. Akeem Julian says again, there ought to be a middle party to fill that void and gulf to bring Grenada back. People like Neville Newman and others have the ideas, energy, and following. They just need to join together, move forward, and step up.
That's why I say that the NDC is the platform for that to happen. We have to look seriously at a third party is going to split up the votes again. And in my opinion, we must build a stronger, united team. And I think this is in the pipeline.
Okay, now we will take a quick break, and when we get back, we will obviously conclude the program. But I want us to conclude the program in a manner as to look forward. Certainly, Dr. Mitchell is saying that this might be his last term in office. So what would a Grenada look like? Let us imagine a Grenada without Dr. Mitchell as political leader of the new National Party and as Prime Minister. And I would begin with you, Mr. Wickham, when we come back, and we would close the program shortly. Let's take a break and we'll be right back.
Since losing that seat, what have you been up to?
Now, Mr. Attorney General, this particular provision sounds unconstitutional. But why were there not consultations before moving forward with the proposals? Did they say what will happen when you guys get to St. Vincent? Because there are pressing social economic issues that I would want to address with you.
In the hyper-information age of social media, the Bub Report knows there is more to the story. We have questions and demand answers. We strive to hold the powerful accountable and tell an unbiased, contextual story. You know what happened. We'll let you know why it happened. There is always more to the story. The Bub Report, streaming every Sunday at 11 a.m. on Facebook and YouTube.
All right, we seem to have lost Mr. Wickham there, but I hope he does return. But Mr. Joseph, I will begin with you as we conclude. Actually, Mr. Wickham, you're back, so I will begin with you. Grenada without a leader as Dr. Mitchell.
Yeah, well, I wanted to get in on the conversation that was going earlier, so I don't know if I can just slip back a bit and give you some a couple of comments on that. because I do have some ideas on development. And it's interesting that the conversation that was taking place between the two gentlemen, it repeats itself all across the Caribbean, where we have this tug of war between what we are doing and what we ought to be doing. I think if there was one.
All right, Mr. Wickham's connection is really unstable there, but let me get to you, Mr. Joseph. Mr. Joseph, as we look forward to the NNP, literally has another 2 years in office before elections are constitutionally due, and so what would Grenada look like in a period when Dr. Mitchell is gone?
Well, much depends on whether or not someone in the form of a leader is able to come forward and offer the country a vision for the next 50 years. If you look towards the Congress, I think they would say that they have an opportunity to do just that. And if they said that to me, I would say make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Leader who can do that. But let me also say that it's a great pity. I think I'm crowning some of Kennedy's submission a while ago. That there's no discernible development philosophy operating in Grenada at this point. What is going down is a money model, right? So that's why, for example, the seed thing and the beneficiaries of the seed is a generational issue. What is at the core of it? At the core of it is poverty. And so that if you check it out, why is poverty growing in Grenada? It's because the development platform is not addressing the thing in any consistent and responsible manner. So we have a problem there. One of the mandates that we must confront as a nation is how, in fact, we address this question of poverty in the Grenadian society. All right, and I would contend that we would need an appropriate development philosophy within which context that would take place. But exit Keith Mitchell, who knows? When Morris Bishop exited, and I wept for months and months and months, I had no idea that Keith Mitchell would come forward. I had no idea. None of us Grenadians knew who would come.
But he was involved in the politics.
But he was abroad and he came and so on, and it sort of, milk the cow at that point. But the point is this, I'm saying, and I agree with Kennedy, that there's a spiritual dimension to this thing, Kennedy. I agree with you entirely, right? And we need to go in that space as a nation to pray for the kind of leader and I make a distinction between leader and leadership, because it is the leader, that character, that person type, that makes the essential difference in this thing. Right? Leadership is a much broader concept and so on, involving other people and other contributions. But the essence and the persona of the leader is what ignites the thing. That is what ties the relationship between people and government. Is this entity called leader. And so we have to get in that space. We must pray for it. Thank you very much.
Mr. Wickham, I will try to bring you back here. We are almost out of time, but the next 2 years, I suspect you might be doing some internal polling for the NNP again if they ask you to.
Or maybe the NDC, who knows? Maybe the NDC this time around.
I mean, I'm sure for you, as long as the price is right, yes? But I will get to you. The elections are constitutionally due in 2 years. Grenada without NNP. What are your thoughts?
I thought you were asking about Grenada without Keith Mitchell. I mean, I really don't know. I don't know who will fill the breach. I don't know who will come up next. But I honestly don't think you're going to have to worry about that in any hurry. I don't think Dr. Mitchell is dying in a hurry. I'm always told that he comes from a family of long livers. His mother is approaching 100.
He has very good genes, I assure you. And
he has good genes, yeah.
About his good genes.
There you go. So I don't know that you're going to have to worry about it in any hurry. And I also don't get the impression that he's anxious to leave office. So for both of those reasons, I think the question as to what happens next is not going to be an urgent one. Very quickly, though, in terms of the development model that I got started talking about when I got knocked off, we're having this conversation in every Caribbean country. Whether you go with one or the other, whether you go with agriculture or tourism, I feel Dr. Mitchell has been loyal to a model that saw his relationship with China evolve and also depended heavily on money that would come through the Citizenship and Investment Program. I think that that has essentially outlived its usefulness. And certainly, if there was one thing I would be critical of, is the extent to which that old model, it worked for a while, it delivered, but it has outlived its usefulness. So then you turn to energy, and we heard some comments earlier on energy. Grenada certainly is sitting on substantial energy resources just offshore, as is Barbados. The challenge is that the environment has also changed, and I thought we saw a situation within 2 years where the prospect of energy exploration has fallen completely flat, especially when you're looking at hydrocarbons. So that model also is one that has to go on the shelf for the time being. So that's off the table. So then what do we have left? There's tourism, there's agriculture. I do feel that there is still room for more foreign direct investment in various projects and so on. There's room for building out the Grenadian economy in that way. But I am not convinced that excessive investment in agriculture is going to take us anywhere. I had a conversation with Peter David when he was Minister of Tourism, where I think he got $1 million US equivalent for a tourism promotion program. And he was saying that you ask any minister, if you take $1 million and you put it into tourism, you take $1 million and you put it into agriculture, what are you going to get greater returns on? And he was right, because as much as tourism appears to be a short-term solution, the reality of the situation is that tourism is the best that we have, because $1 million US in a tourism investment will give Grenada a whole lot more than $1 million in an agricultural investment, whether we like it or not. You've done reasonably well in terms of your agriculture and your look at the chocolates, for example. That was one of your enterprising areas. But the reality is that that has not gone very far, and that has not been. It has not given you the kind of returns, even though it has been a great feel good. It hasn't given you the kind of returns that you could have gained from something like tourism. So I kind of wonder if it isn't wise to focus more on where you have your comparative advantage for the time being.
And then, Mr. Roberts, I'll bring you in finally. You've said a lot about what the current administration is not doing. What has the administration done good that you support or endorse?
I must say that, again, the numbers with regards to COVID has shown that Grenada has done something right. I have no problem in acknowledging that the current state of COVID in the Caribbean is an indicator that Grenada has done something well to keep the numbers down. I still maintain that the involvement of the opposition, the Chamber of Commerce, the private sector, and so in the whole management of COVID had room for improvement. Right now, with the vaccination rollout, a lot of people are still hesitant about the vaccine, but the whole education communication program, in my opinion, has room for strengthening. So I think that with regards to COVID, I'll give them some sort of passing mark. But I sat down and I listed all the sectors: agriculture, education, tourism, infrastructure, and everything. And Kellan, the reality is, in most sectors, we did not see significant progress in the last 3 years. You see, the NNP has a sort of strategy where soon after winning an election, they reduce spending, and then they in the last 2 years before an election, you see they pump it. So that's why you see in the budget, they have tremendous amount of projects slated for this year. But again, the end of the year would show us the level of implementation. So I am having a difficulty to really see, what has happened really. Yes, they get some big projects, but again, with regards to the whole tourism versus agriculture, I am seeing there is room for marrying the two. When people visit Grenada, my vision for tourism is one where they will go into the community. They will go and they would visit the small backyard farm of someone. They would pick the products and go and cook it in a meal and share it. They're going to walk by the river. They want to do yoga by the lake. So the sort of tourism agricultural link is something that we have to think through and encourage people and support people. Small micro enterprises, that has not been given the attention it deserves, because we know that when you have small, micro, medium enterprises, that is the engine for a lot of economic activity at the ground level. So the government has been talking about some of this, and I'm aware of certain things happening in the tourism sector, the way in which yachting was treated. A lot of people might not be aware that after COVID came last year, by the end of May, there was a protocol in place for yachts to come quarantine, because we know yachting contributes a lot to the economy. So I know that there have been a few things happening, and yes, there's a certain level of peace and security, but the whole relationship with the public and the police, that has deteriorated also. We see the whole shooting of the young man for smoking a spliff. The NDC brought the issue of decriminalizing of marijuana on the agenda. The government jumped up and said, yes, we're really thinking about it too. But again, we know they're just waiting just before the election to promote the promise again. But the NDC has indicated that we're going with the CARICOM Commission on marijuana. We're proceeding and making sure that the lives of young people especially are not damaged and destroyed because of the herb, which is now in the US, Canada, all over the world being recognized for its true potential. And we need to reflect on these things. So the NDC has a challenge. The NDC has a plan. And I will mention one specific thing with regards to the SEED program. The whole concept of social security is going to be given a high priority. You see how NIS, how they're struggling for contributions? The concept of an NIS can be modified to take into consideration social security needs from birth to death. So programs like SEED should not be in a ministry. It should be under a social security institution. They should be writing grants to get funding to support the training of persons to increase the level of income in Grenada. NIS is struggling because people are earning too little. And the NDC is going to make sure that we work at the ground level. We work at the small, medium, micro enterprise level. We work at the private sector of current businesses who want that little extra effort and help to succeed. And they're not getting that now. So we've identified several specific activities that must be implemented. And I would love for the NNP to take some of these ideas and start with it now, because I am for Grenada. The NDC is for Grenadians, for all Grenadians at home and abroad. We have people like yourself and hundreds and thousands of others living in the diaspora who are not fulfilling their true potential for Grenada. You're playing your role now with the communication, but we have engineers, we have experts in almost every field of endeavor who, with the right mechanism, can do a lot more. I've been down at SGU for 22 years, and I have seen proposals go to the ministry, recommendations made for the university to do a lot more, and they've been not given that encouragement, because the role of the university is to deal with the education of their students, and it is up to the government of the Grenada to initiate a discussion for the benefit of Grenada. Our relationship with the Chinese. I've had meetings with Chinese on behalf of the NDC, and we've talked, because the NDC was in office in 2008, 2013. The policy towards China has been the recognition of the One China policy. The relationship with China has been relatively good, and as a result, this government has made the relationship with China seem that it is what they can give us rather than what we want. Those of us who have seen the Chinese development plan for Grenada are baffled. And that's why, Brother Willie, you said that the NDC did not endorse the National Strategic Plan. Because, again, it might be an issue that we have not made public. But I was involved, and yes, we support what is in the plan. But our position is what is in the plan is not a reflection of what this government is doing. So they pappy show the social partners, they got funding for the process. Yes, we produce a document, but what are they doing to involve people at the community level or to build on that plan? So that is my concern. So Kellan, I really appreciate this opportunity to articulate the views of the NDC. I believe that we're at a threshold where we're poised for another level of activity within the NDC and within Grenada. And I look forward to the support. And Brother Wickham, we might have to talk about a poll in Grenada to see what the people are saying. But we're going to be doing polls also. We're going to be working towards getting a better understanding of what the people want. And I believe the future of the NDC and the future of Grenada is bright.
Mr. Wickham, your services are being solicited to the extent that you're a freelancer, sir. I don't know. But viewers and listeners, let me thank you for the opportunity to join you today on the Bub Report. As a programming reminder, this program is also streamed as a repeat broadcast in Grenada on Wednesday evenings at 8:05 p.m. on the Grenada Broadcasting Network. So we do have a broadcast partnership with them, and we thank them for that. So for those of you who do not use social media, you have an opportunity to see it on air in Grenada as well. Let me take this opportunity again to thank everyone for joining us and listening to us today on the Bub Report. Have a great week. Bye-bye.